Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly. I'm an alcoholic, and welcome to the Grapevine Open Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll be your host for the month of August, this is the last Wednesday. This is the AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. You can enjoy the Grapevine Open meetings every Wednesday at noon Eastern Time on this virtual platform. The meeting will be recorded and will be posted as an audio podcast every Friday on all podcast platforms, on aagrapevine.org, and on YouTube. This is an open meeting. Everyone is welcome. We are glad you are all here, especially newcomers. If you are new to AA and want to learn more about our program of recovery from alcoholism, we encourage you to find an AA group in your area. Contact with group members will help you to find a sponsor and help you learn about the AA program of recovery from alcoholism. Today's Grapevine quote, daily quote, August 26. I am free to like and enjoy what I have. I don't need to exhibit my high values by hating my rowboat for not being a yacht, my house for not being a palace, my child for not being a prodigy. Isla Medora, Florida, November 1971, from The Impossible Dream, Best of Grapevine, Volume 1. You can sign up to receive the daily quote as a daily email at aagrapevine.org, or you will find it on the Grapevine app every morning. Now, here's an excerpt from this month's Grapevine magazine. I have a long sentence, and some days I feel very hopeless and alone. I found so much hope in the pages of the Grapevine. The greatest message I've gotten from AA members is that I don't have to do this alone. There are others who know how I feel and who have been through what I'm going through. Here's a reading from the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. Yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you. How is that to come about, you ask? Where am I to find these people? You are going to meet these new friends in your own community. Near you, alcoholics are dying helplessly, like people in a sinking ship. If you live in a large place, there are hundreds, high and low, rich and poor. These are future fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Among them, you will make lifelong friends. You will be bound to them with new and wonderful ties, for you will escape disaster together, and you will commence shoulder to shoulder your common journey. Then you will know what it means to give of yourself that others may survive and rediscover life. You will learn the full meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself. This will be a two-speaker meeting. There will be no sharing by attendees, so please sit back, relax, and listen. We often hear it is best to try and identify with the speakers rather than compare your story with theirs. Today, my first speaker is Sheri G. from Brookhaven, New York.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sheri. So thank you for asking me to speak on the podcast. Recently, actually, on the 7th of this month, I celebrated 6 years. And I've been thinking a lot about where I've come, how I've come along in these past 6 years. And it's been quite the journey. My journey started back in 1991 with my first AA meeting, and I didn't understand what this meeting and this program and the steps would be able to relieve me of. And I suffered for a lot of years. Many times I never understood my alcoholism. I just thought I liked to drink and too much, and party too much, and thought blacking out was a part of that. Because at 16, I was blacking out, and I just thought that was normal. So when I went into my first program, I didn't understand it. I wasn't ready, and it would be a very long time. Growing up in my house, I had a loving family, but there were things that happened, that bred my disease. So growing up, I wasn't taught to talk about my feelings. If anything, I was shamed for them when I was able to talk about them. So it taught me, to go to my room and cry and, give you something to cry about. So my feelings weren't valid, and I had to deal with them alone. And that's what my disease loved, for me to be isolated. So once the largest memory I have of any type of traumatic impact was when I was 11, and my mother had told me she would never love me the way she loved my half sister. And that set the stage for me not being able to be good enough. And that continued for a very long time. So at 18, when I went into my first rehab, I was a baby. I didn't understand it. I just know that when I got into my addiction, and my addiction led into other things. So drugs are a part of my story, but I'll stick with alcohol because that's where it all began, and that was always present in my life. But my disease kept me from, going to see my father, who was very sick. And at 22, I lost him. And, he was 48 and died from leukemia. And I went on to be told that, I caused it because of the way I behaved. My father got sick because of me. And again, this is another pattern that would happen. The sick people in my life would put these ideas in my head that I was responsible for these things. After that, I had my first son right before my dad passed away, my son Robert. I had him at 20. I was in an abusive relationship, so that was another pattern in my life. But years later, after getting away from that relationship, and I had some time of just being dry, out of fear, and of anything more than anything else. And I met a guy, and he was pretty amazing. We had another child. I had another child, bought a house, and eventually, things had happened with him, and he got hooked on pain medication, and he passed away in one of the jails here where I live. And that was the hardest thing. I had a 13-year-old and I had a 3-year-old, and I didn't think I was enough to take care of them. And that led into 4 years of me in and out of programs. Again, I didn't understand what was waiting for me in AA, but I kept trying, even though I didn't understand it. I was in different TCs for 8 months at a time because this alcoholic believed I needed to be locked away. I didn't know at all, you were waiting for me to love me. I thought, lock me away, and the space and the time would help me. And I did that in multiple programs over the 4-year period. All I had was 8 months each time, because once I was out, I was in the real world, and I had no program. I had no community. So I just continued to do the same thing. And, I was arrested multiple times, and I say I was a resident of the gated communities in my county. But, the thing with that is that would come back into my life later on. So after spending, some time getting arrested and getting put on another program, I was able to live in a bubble on the outside. And it gave me, the 90 and 90, get a home group, commitment, sponsor, and I did those things, but I still had a foot in my old life. I didn't understand that living sober is to be like fully sober. And that would cost me, it would take some time, but eventually me thinking that everybody else wasn't honest in these meetings was because I didn't understand the very first principle of honesty. I thought I was sober. My oldest son gave me my 1-year coin, and eventually I went back to drinking. I didn't make the connections. I didn't do the work. I was always so fearful of the work. Didn't understand how that would help me with my disease. So I didn't even understand I had a disease. I didn't even think I was alcoholic at that time. I thought it was the other stuff that was affecting me. So I get a house, and my boys come back with me, and my oldest son was struggling with his mental health. And, it was hard, but I was doing my best to be there for him. I see today that I absolutely was not present where I could have been. So in 2019, I was taking care of my mother, and she was not well, and I was feeding her, bringing her food and what have you, and 2 days I had not seen her. I went to her house, and I found her body, and she was deceased on the floor for and it was traumatic. And I was active at that time. I was probably in my longest use period, which was about 2.5 years straight of drinking and just destroying my life. And I had abandoned my children. And that was something I did regularly throughout my disease, active addiction. And I wound up back in that gated community and on Mother's Day. And the very next Mother's Day, I would get out, I'd go into another TC, I'd make little connections, but a year later, I would spend the next Mother's Day without my oldest son. It was on March 2nd. He hung himself in 2020. And, I never thought I could survive. I couldn't understand how I could live the rest of my life without my firstborn, my other half. And that's when I really learned, like one day at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 second at a time, because that's the only way I got through it. And I found out I had a grandchild from him. And I'll tell you, the moment I found that out, I felt something inside me. And I really heard it say, it's going to be okay. And I know that's my higher power. You see, I always had that connection. As a little child, my dad would put me in the mirror and clean the little sleeps out of my eyes and say, who loves you? And I'd say, Jesus loves me, Daddy. And he'd say, who loves you more? I'm like, nobody loves me more than Jesus. So I moved away from that. And at that time, I believe it was so present in my life because after 2 attempts at my life, to end my life, I wound up in a psych ward and then back in crawling into a detox. And that day, that girl did not have a plan. All she had was prayer. And I'll never forget it, because I got on my knees in that hospital room and I prayed that God could relieve me of this obsession I carried my whole life. And I didn't understand it at that time. I didn't even want to live, let alone be sober. Like I just was doing it for my son. I didn't want him to die in vain. And years later, I got out of there and I crawled in my house and I looked in these screens because it was COVID. And I begged for my life with those women that I had established back when I was in that program that I needed to do the 90-90. And because I was always in and out of it, going to that meeting. There was something in that room that I wanted that they had. I just didn't understand how to get it. And it can, I got the sponsor. I started to do what she told me to do, everything she told me to do. And, but I still didn't truly want to live. I started to use food and stuff my feelings. And I took time doing my steps. I shared at about 2 years sober in a meeting that I think like God rewired my brain in one of my attempts when I was almost successful. And what I realize now is that when I prayed on that floor, that there was an incredible change that happened that had relieved me of the obsession to use, which gave me enough space to then begin to work these steps, to then begin to love myself and forgive myself. And it's taught me through working the steps and staying connected that I've learned to take the pain that I carry and turn it into a power. You see, like I've always met the pain and then recoiled from it and numbed it. And this time, walking through it and having the courage to go through it, waiting on the other side of that pain was this power that I gained. And little by slowly, I started to feel worthy and I started learning how to have this conscious contact with my higher power, because during the past 6 years, it hasn't been easy. People fail me and I fail myself. I judge myself. So I've learned to practice a process that was used early on, the 2A prayer, and it helped me connect deeper with my higher power at times when I truly need it. But I do notice that times I will fall short and not do the things that help me, and then I suffer for it. And I've been going through some issues lately in my family, and I need to remember that when I'm irritable or discontent, that I'm in my self-centered ways, and I need to ask God, what is it that your direction is for me here? It's not always easy, but once I remember the principles that I'm learning in this program, it truly helps me apply them and live a bit softer. And I have made the most incredible healthy relationships today because of this program. I'm able to build these bonds with women. I'm learning to have the boundaries that I need, which were never present for me. I've been helpful. I feel this path that's laid before me, I see it today. I never was able to see it. I never thought that I could do anything. And I've been part of co-founding 2 groups, and that's been so rewarding. I didn't think I would have fun without drinking and doing the things I did. And today I have the most amazing fun. I go to incredible events and conventions, and we get a whole van full of girls together and go up to the homeland of AA back in Akron, Ohio, and we get to learn the history, and it's just electric when you're there. It's beautiful to take new people there and watch the light come on in their life. For that first year and a half, I tell you, people would say, how are you doing this? And I'd say, I don't know. My feet move, and my eyes open and my feet move, and I just keep going forward. And I know today, I have this purpose that's incredible, and the gratitude that I feel I heard a quote, and it's stayed with me, because that first year I couldn't find gratitude. And I heard a quote that said, with gratitude, optimism is sustainable. And that is something I held on to, because I could not find any way that I used to feel like I feel this guilt about being happy, or like, how can I be without my child? And today I know that my son used to say to me, Mom, when I would stop going to a meeting, you lost your spark. Please stay in those meetings, because you have this sparkle. And I truly believe that. I feel it. When I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, I'm suffering. And then I'm not able to see the path of what my higher power wants me to do. And that's the most important to me. Most recently, I was able to go back to one of those gated communities, and it was a little scary to be there this time. And I shared with the CO, I had told her, wow, in 2019, the sounds of those bars locking behind me, I never felt so free. It hits differently today. And she said, wow, you were here? I said, yeah. So I was able to see my mugshot, which was pretty powerful. But the most important thing I learned too that day was, when I'm in these facilities, and this is where I find my purpose. It wasn't that I'm Robert's mother, or I have this job label, or, to achieve this status or whatever in life. Those were just things that I told myself, stories that I needed. What I learned is, in losing my child and suffering through that trauma in 1 year of losing my mother and my boy, my soul was squeezed so tightly that it remembered its true purpose, and that's to be of service. So I go into those dark places and hope that I could bring a bit of a sparkle, a bit of hope to anybody that's in a difficult spot, that no matter what, as long as you keep pushing through and persevering, it's going to be okay. And, just don't give up. When I was in that last facility and I spoke, when I come into those places, I'm talking to the people who I'm thinking I'm meant to hit, like whether it's the inmates or the patients. And that day was somebody else. It was one of those COs that wouldn't crack a smile at me when we came in. And at the end of me sharing, she escorted us out, and she asked me a couple questions. She has some children, the young boys, and she was concerned about what she doesn't want them to have to ever experience what she hears in the stories that come in there. And she asked if I was in a different environment, if I grew up in a different household, would I have made the same path? And I told her I honestly couldn't tell you yes or no. All I know is that my household bred my disease that was waiting. And she asked, oh, please. And it was amazing. It was like there was no more uniform. She was just another mother full of fear. And she said, what can I do? What can I do that could help them not wind up here, God forbid, like your son? And I said, educate them. Make sure that they could come to you with anything. That wasn't my story, And most importantly, know what's going on in their lives. And, she hugged. And they don't do that either. So that was pretty cool. So that day, it wasn't the people that I thought that I was supposed to reach. It was someone completely different. So each and every day, I have to remember to get on my knees, to pray. I ask God to use me that day in the best way so I get out of myself. But I'm so grateful to come here and be able to share my experience, my strength, and my hope. And I truly hope today I'm able to reach somebody that may need a little sparkle, a little hope. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Sheri, so much. I'm still holding back tears. Still holding them back. There was a lot of identification there. Um, and I think what really spoke to me was how you took your pain and you turned it into power. And that's a direct result of, practicing this program. And I too, like I experienced a lot of grief and loss. And, I was maybe 2 weeks sober when my sister passed away. And like you said, it was like, how did I like just left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. And the rooms also practicing this program carried me. So thank you for that story, because I definitely identify with it. Just a few announcements before we go to our second speaker. Hopefully, I can stop crying. The seventh tradition of AA states that every group should be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. AA members can help by contributing to your group, your local office, your area and district, and to the General Service Board. There's a great pamphlet called Self-Support, Where Money and Spirituality Mix. You can find it on aa.org. Grapevine does not accept direct contributions, but of course, we do have expenses. The best way to support Grapevine is to subscribe to the magazine, either in print, online, or on the apps. You can subscribe to the magazine in print or online by visiting aagrapevine.org. You can also purchase Grapevine books, greeting cards, and other items at your local AA office. By doing so, you'll be supporting both Grapevine and your local office. You can also visit the Grapevine online store at aagrapevine.org. The AA Grapevine Carry the Message project allows you to help us help others by providing magazine subscriptions to those who are in those gated communities that Sheri spoke of, incarcerated, hospitalized, living in remote areas, or stuck at home. Visit aagrapevine.org and click on Carry the Message to learn more. We invite you to listen to our other weekly podcast, AA Grapevine Half Hour Variety Hour, which is available for free on all podcast platforms and on aagrapevine.org. Check out our primary purpose, the official podcast of the General Service Office of Alcoholics Anonymous. Tune in to hear how AA's message continues to reach those who need it most. For all podcasts, be sure to subscribe on your favorite streaming platform so that you can catch all episodes. Please follow Grapevine on Instagram and YouTube as well. My second speaker is John V. from Stony Brook, also Long Island. John, please unmute yourself.
Yes, and self-timer is on. Thank you, Kimberly, for the introduction. Thank you, Sheri, for sharing your experience, sharing the hope. My name is John V, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm a satisfied customer of AA, as Kimberly said, residing in Long Island. My home group is the Stony Brook Freethinkers. It meets today at 7:30 and on Friday 7:30. It is a hybrid meeting, so you can log on from wherever if you're not able to be there in person. I do have a sponsor. I also have a service sponsor. I do service below the group level in a lot of different varieties, and I'm honored to do that. And I say that not to give myself praise and accolades and pats in the backs and claps and yada yadas. I basically say that to tell everyone here that I'm actively participating in my recovery. And for that, I haven't had a reason to pick up a drink since December. I forgot, December 26, 2000. So the day after Christmas is a very sacred day to me. Well, all right, to share what I was like and what happened, what I'm like now, is to basically tell you my beginnings. I still live in Long Island. I've been there all my life. Actually, I will sometimes pass down the area where I grew up in. And just like our previous speaker, loving home. But I was the person that was sent to therapy since I was 7 years old. So I was kind of groomed to always say what I'm feeling. I know it's a very common thing to hear in meetings, and I don't want to feel like I'm different or anyone's unique, but everyone has their experiences on how their what their home life was. But that doesn't make me alcoholic. I My parents would get upset if I didn't tell what I was feeling, and when I did, they got more upset because I was very honest. I told too much of the truth. Growing up in a house where we had to, and it actually talks about it in the book about escaping creditors and stuff like that. um, my father being in his business, we basically, it was like a matter of, oh, we didn't pay this, didn't pay that, and ducking and hiding. And that's not a way I wanted to live. But as a kid, this is what I was growing up with. We also taught, I do have a younger sibling. He's 11 months apart. We're Irish twins, as they call it. We have nothing in common except our last name, but we fought all the time. And my parents would get mad at us for fighting. Meanwhile, they were fighting me on the bedroom. So once again, mixed messages, but I can't blame my parents. They were, God rest their soul, they're both deceased. They did the best they could with they had. But when alcohol came in, I gotta say, I do remember one of those people I do remember when I first drank. It was at 5 years old. The half brother that I'm no longer in contact with. We were surrounded by teenagers back in the 80s, where hair metal and lacy boots and ripped jeans were a style, and they were drinking a beer. And I had that beer, and I guzzled it, and I didn't say, oh, I just wanted more. They were like amazed. So that was when I was a little kid. Whatever bad example, whatever, I took the drink. What happened 10 years later is when I had my first drunk at a party. It was a gathering. I thought it was, oh, we're going to dress up as costumes during the spooky season. No, it was alcohol. And I'm not going to name what brands, but I just say it was love at first sip. And it was one of those, all the worries and the cares in the world were no longer existed. The person that was fearful of opening up to people, the one who had no girlfriend going into his junior high school, who had barely any friends because all I did was fight and take them away, was all disappeared. As they say, that drink, the ease and comfort, and care and boredom was like God. And I was like, when's the next one? Now it's a matter of finding the people to drink with. But if there's no people to drink with, nothing stops this alcoholic having to drink. It's just wanting more. It was, like you hear a lot in meetings, like there's never enough. And they say there's too much alcohol. There's never enough alcohol and that was my experience for the many years I was still actively drinking. And so I had to, shortly after that first drunk, I had to leave. I was actually not, I was expelled from the school I went to for whatever. They thought I was a menace to society. And I also had special needs that I needed required. So now I had to have tutors go home, and it was embarrassing just to finish school. But I wanted to get the heck out of school and do an adult living. Meanwhile, I'm not even mature, ready to deal with the world around me. As they say, I'll quote the Big Book a lot because it is not just our basic text, it's a conference approved literature, and it's what has been helping alcoholics for years. So for me, I don't divert from it. I won't read it from word for word because my brain's not wired for that, but I'll share my experiences that I was maladjusted to life. It's not, they say it's not the alcohol, it's me the problem. That's not true. It's not me that's the problem. I'm maladjusted. I cannot accept the terms of everything that is dealt with me. And that is not the reason why I drink. It's just that when I drink, I lose the power of choice. That took a very long time to understand that in the rooms and meetings and going through the sponsors that this was a lack of power, the loss of power of choice. So, my first ever introduction to any kind of message of recovery was in high school because people were coming in sharing their story. And I was just getting started. I was quietly secret weekend warrior. having my drink in the woods, because that's typical Long Island story of how people started to drink in the woods. Drink in the woods and road rage seems to be very hot topics. But that's exactly what I was hearing, and I don't. A lot of things I could not understand because I was doing like what Kimberly mentioned is like relate, not compare. And my comparison is like, oh, I didn't do that. I wasn't drinking like that. Unfortunately, that sometimes clouds people's minds and stops them hearing from that the message. But the one message I did hear from someone is that when the doors closed on her mother's funeral, it was the biggest bang and it changed her life because she went on a tear, and the disease was not waiting for her outside of a funeral home. It was progressing inside her. My alcoholism progresses when I'm not doing anything for it, when I'm not getting spiritually treated, and and the drink is just what happens when that thought just takes over, and it's like what they say in the book: obsession of the mind, compulsion of the body. Ruining friendships. People are telling me that I'm not allowed to come back. I purposely get the keys saying you're to be designated driver. So it means, you're not going to be drinking. And I didn't listen to a lot of people. That's why, when coming to do amends is very important for direct, whether it's verbally or just showing the change, because the alcoholic is not just the only one affected by alcoholism, by drinking. It's a whirlwind of everyone around us. So, and I will give a plug to our beautiful fellowship, which we always cooperate with Al-Anon for carrying that message and showing that we too can recover. So going back to my journey, I finished high school. I finally have a group of friends, and I thought I had the world. I have older friends. We can go get beer. We can continue to drink in the woods. We can continue to explore places. There's freedom. I'm driving my hand-me-down car. I'm getting money. And I thought these were all external things that are going to make John V happy. They're going to create a person. Meanwhile, I was dying inside. I was not happy, internally not smiling, and not accepting anything. So, and like I said, when that person shared about her mother's funeral, I did relate to that because when my mother passed from cancer, that was a big change in our life. And now I had to be friends with this guy called Dad, who I really had a hard time getting along with, try to be the oldest, best example of my siblings, which I wasn't present enough for them. I wasn't being an example. Fights with family, having the cops called. These are just actions that I happened because I lost that power of control. Plain and simple. There's really nothing to analyze about it. My externals were not the reason for it. I don't look too much into like why. I was someone who just couldn't handle alcohol. I just took me a while, and sometimes the alcoholic is the last person to figure this out, is that that powerlessness, alcohol, it's got to continue unless you smash the delusion. As they say in the book, smash the delusion, you can drink safely. Now I can say that I can do this kind of service and go right back next door and go find whatever kind of there's no such thing as drink of choice. It's such a I hear that and it makes no sense. That alcohol I crave, that's a plan, but the reservation is to think I can do it safely. And I continuously do that uncontrolled drinking, being unsafe, being that tyrant in people's lives. And it just comes down to I'm either going to accept spiritual help or drink till I off myself, and other plans seem really like a good idea. When any alcoholic, when they have a good idea, they run it by people. It's usually a bad idea. So thank God for good sponsorship. Thank God for friends in my circle of recovery. When I have a great, big, bold idea, run it by a lot of them. So now it's part to the strength of the experience, strength of hope. Someone that cared enough introduced me to my first meeting in a town called Sayville. It was on a Thursday night in the winter. I was still employable, but not, like I said, not emotionally there for anybody, not really emotionally there for any of my colleagues. And it was very lonely. Alcoholism is a very lonely business, and A is the last resort. Just for me, other people have found other many paths and ways to recover, and that's blessing to them. I've learned this in this years of journey. We don't bash other people's success and where they go. We encourage and support it. I stick to what I know best. I stick to what's worked for me. And that's the old school way of AA. When I came in, they weren't giving freely meeting lists out with numbers on it. You had to show and prove, break the ice, go up to someone and get their number. And I'm grateful I learned that in my first meeting because it got me to get out of my comfort zone of isolation, to such thing, and to actually ask for help. The first person, I didn't want a male sponsor. I have a thing with men. I think I could say this. Some of us are just big babies and big boys and adult bodies, and I was like not having it. But I asked the guy who was a former Marine drill sergeant who had tattoos of sandals all over, and he told me to trust him. And I'm like, yeah, right. And he gave me my first big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. He told me to read it. This is not a common time where I know nowadays, sponsors take people to sponsoring through the big book line by line and spend a very long time in coffee houses, which is great. Blessings to you for that. I didn't get that kind of, I was basically, you want what we have, you do what we do. And it took me a while. It took me a really good reaming out to finally finish reading the book. I didn't have any questions because I really still don't understand it. So I had to read through it again. That sponsor dropped me because I was not taking his direction, and he had every right to, because it says in the book, we find it a waste of time chasing someone who's not willing to take our direction. And I'm someone who suffered well when I didn't take direction. That's the thing I used to hear a lot, suffer well. And so that kind of old school mentality has kind of been groomed in me, and I bring it, and it gets intimidating nowadays, but I am responsible for carrying the message, not the drunk. So the message that I've come to understand and really live by is that this is a matter of keeping all areas of the legacies in my recovery through this 12 steps, having that spiritual awakening, making peace with my past so I don't continue to have this pity party of what I did and didn't do, allowing change to happen, being more reliant on a higher power than self-reliance. If self-reliance worked for this junk, I can just tell myself that I'm not going to drink today and I don't need any of the literature, any to do these things like this, do the things that I'm blessed to do, I get to do. If I can just tell myself that I'm not going to drink one day at a time, why would I need to praise Alcoholics Anonymous? I owe my life to this fellowship, and to give away is not a inconvenience. I've heard a lot of unfortunate, wrong information about how service is inconvenient. It's not true. Whoever said that doesn't do any service, in my experience, or doesn't do enough. So recovery through the steps. Unity through our fellowship with traditions to make sure we get to continue to be available for the person, newcomer, to keep the doors open, to keep our mouths closed and minding our own business when it comes to things other than the program recovery of Alcoholics Anonymous. These are things I learned through traditions because I care enough about it to have it be available for, say, one of my family members or one of my good friends' kids, so that message continues to get trickled down. I also rely on the literature too. Being this is a Grapevine podcast, of course, was a good student. All the examples of all the grapevines I kind of hoard and collect and read them on my spare time. I do want to share a story. Into Action is one of the great books I have, one of the many, and it talks about the last page, a guy who went to Alaska, who got his recovery in Arizona, who went to Alaska in a very remote area, and I know how remote Alaska can be. he may have been in areas where there was no physical meetings or even service to go on a Zoom meeting. Relying on asking God for help, reading the grapevine, listening to AA tapes, and calling my sponsor, God and AA has never let him down. And I've heard testimonies of my own true good friends who said that they had to sit in a hospital while tending to their family members and had the grapevine literature with them. So they relied not just on the fellowship and on people, but on the tools that are given, the tools of program recovery. One of the books that I really enjoyed, I'm glad I should actually case this because I don't think it's even out of print anymore, is I Am Responsible. I've been really drilling into the I Am Responsible statement for my own recovery and for, also to be accountable. And I love how it just talks about being friendly with our friends in this book, about, honoring those professionals and honoring those people who are friends of the fellowship. Just because they don't have went through the war of alcoholism doesn't mean that they're not reliable sources. All of it is, I seek counsel through, I'm in the healthcare field too. So part of the things I do with cooperation with professional community is reach out to non-alcoholic professionals who may have encounter with people with a drinking problem. And our story is really just to say what we are and what we aren't in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's been a pleasure doing that. We need more people doing more service, by the way. I know I didn't want to turn this into a service resume, but we give such praise and accolades to people for the ones who are doing service. What we really need is more people, more boots on the ground. This doesn't take a lot of my time at all. It's actually an honor and a privilege. And, through the years, also service, like I said, that's all the third legacy. That has all kept me into the loop and doesn't get me off the wagon. I have a really blessed life and continue to be of service when I can be struggling because principles of personalities, drama, this and that. But I got to remember that I don't take on the world's affairs. I don't take on other people's affairs, detach with love. Sometimes I build brick walls, not just glass. I build brick walls so no one gets around me. But I can find in the people I know and the people that are on here that I truly do care about. And we have really deep spiritual connections. It's not just, what's the latest gossip on this one? I don't have time for that. I really don't. I don't even have patience for that. But one thing's for sure, if I'm ever in that stuck place, do it the script that I think one of the founders, you'll see it sometimes. It says, trust God, clean house, work with others. If I'm going through something, I should be working with others. This is not a time to just isolate and sulk, and that may be a little too stern and abrupt. But the thing is, it's kept me away from a drink and away from self-destructive behavior for 25 years. So why would I divert and think I can do it? I can do it on my own. I'm going to wrap up because I don't want to hear myself talk anymore. Anything over 15 to 20 minutes is more ego talking. I want to thank everyone for participating. I am a big supporter of the Grapevine and Lavinia, and I wish you all a blessed day and continue to keep on carrying the message and being your awesome self. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I identify so much with the building of the brick walls and not, having you had to ask a man to be a sponsor. I'm like, I had to ask a woman to be a sponsor, and by that time I had already had 3 mothers. I was like, I do not trust women. And the reading that I read before, among them, you'll make lifelong friends. You'll be bound to them with new and wonderful ties, for you will escape disaster together, and you will commence shoulder to shoulder your common journey. Both my speakers today are a definition of that. I met John in active alcoholism, and because of his service, our mutual friend called him and said, "What do I do with this drunk in my house?" And I also met Sheri right at the beginning when I finally had surrendered. So when I read these readings and about having lifelong friends, I mean, these 2 speakers are the equivalent of that. So thank you. So let your friends know about our meeting. This is an open meeting, so it is also ideal for friends who want to learn more about Alcoholics Anonymous. Keep this in mind when doing cooperation with the professional community. John mentioned that, or public information. And now at this time, I'm going to ask Sheri if she can unmute and close the meeting with the prayer of your choice.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. So if we can have a moment of silence, and then we'll end with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. As we lead us not as we lead us trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thy is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you.